Hey everyone, I'm Brittany Lewis, a reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Rob LaFranco, assistant managing editor. Per usual, Rob, thank you so much for joining me.
Always a pleasure, Brittany.
I do want to jump right in, so let's get started with some music news.
Yes.
After 5 years, Elton John's Farewell Yellow Brick Road tour became the highest grossing tour at more than $817 million. First, is this surprising?
Look, those numbers are monstrous. I mean, you do not normally see tours even over 300 million typical. I mean, this is a massive tour. Elton John is a massive star. Let's keep in mind, put some into perspective. I mean, he beats Ed Sheeran, tops him. It was about 766 million. The biggest tours in the world are 600, 700 million. Names you would know, U2, Rolling Stones. Typically, those are over the course of about 18 months. So Elton, it's a little not fair to make the comparison because he's been on the road for 5 years, but it's a massive achievement. I mean, hitting $800 million in concert ticket sales is monstrous.
It is a massive achievement, but I mean, that 5-year number, that's a long time for one tour. I mean, it's called the Farewell Tour, and he's still going. He hasn't really said bye yet. Is this normal for a tour to go on this long?
It's normal and it's not. I mean, if you remember, Cher was doing a goodbye tour, I think, 10 years in a row, it seemed like. Kiss did their farewell tour 3 times, I think. I think the Eagles have done it. I mean, Elton he's an older guy. I just give you an anecdote. I interviewed Jimmy Buffett when he was 48. This was 25 or so years ago. And he said at the time he was getting tired. He's like, man, no matter how nice your hotel room is, no matter how nice that tour bus is, it's a grind to be on the road. I don't know how much longer I can do it. He was 48. Elton's got 30 years on him.
And he's still going, yeah.
So to be on the road for 5 years, granted, he lives a very nice lifestyle, but to show up on stage every night, and he's gone from arenas to stadiums, and that, you playing to 60 million people, there's an energy that you need to give. It's truly astounding, I have to say. I'm very impressed.
I can't imagine, but do you think that him touting that this was his goodbye, his farewell tour had something to do with that popularity?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it brings the audience out. If you've never seen Elton before, this is the time you're going to go. If you've seen him 5 times before, wow, I got to see this last one. Yeah, for sure. These farewell tours, again, I think that's why people end up doing them 2 or 3 times. I don't think Elton if he's on the road for 5 years, I think this truly is a farewell tour. But it's the reason why people do them.
I do want to read some stats really quick. He's also the highest grossing solo artist, with his total tour gross at over $1.8 billion going back to 1986. He's played over 1,500 shows and sold more than 19 million tickets. And currently he sits at number 3 on Billboard's greatest of all time artist lists, only behind the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. So legends. Is this deserved?
Very much so. I mean, and also, I mean, the Beatles are the Beatles, separate category. The Rolling Stones have been doing these massive tours. I mean, they were a standby for big tours, and they set the standard for big tours back in the 80s. Elton was never that guy. Like, his shows aren't the Rolling Stone tours that we all know. Every year you expect something newer and bigger. For Elton, it was what kind of costume is he going to wear, right? So. Yeah, it's very well deserved. I mean, this guy is an icon. He's written some of the most iconic songs, pop songs, through the 70s, through the 80s, through the 90s. He did a whole stint with Disney writing the soundtracks for those movies. So it's not surprising. I mean, when you actually see the number written out and you're like, wow, that's a big number. That's surprising. But the fact that it's Elton John isn't surprising.
Yeah, the stats are staggering, but Elton John released his first album, Empty Sky, in 1969. So how has he stood the test of time for decades upon decades?
Songwriting. And, and you got to give credit to Bernie Taupin as well. Those two were songwriters for decades together. I mean, just think of the songs that he's written that are just lodged into culture. I mean, they just Captain Fantastic and Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. And you're going all the way back. These guys were writing songs that were seminal pop songs. And so, for sure, this is extremely well-deserved. Absolutely.
I know. I think anyone could, if their top 10 favorite songs, at least one Elton John song is probably in there.
Most likely.
And out of the top 10 highest-grossing tours, there's not a solo headliner. I'm going to read you the top 10. Mm-hmm. We have Elton John, Ed Sheeran, U2, Guns N' Roses, the Rolling Stones twice, Coldplay, Roger Waters, AC/DC, and Metallica. Do you think Taylor Swift could break into this with her upcoming Eras tour?
She definitely has a good shot. I mean, those advanced ticket sales were massive.
They broke the internet.
Broke the internet, literally. I think it was 2.3 million were sold, and they're selling more now. So she's looking at a 3 to 4 billion, maybe 5, audience size. I think for sure the thing that you have to remember, everyone always goes after Ticketmaster for the amount they have to spend to go to a concert, and you can go after Ticketmaster for fees anytime you want, but these ticket prices are being set by the artists. Right, so you look at Elton John played to far fewer people than Ed Sheeran did on his tour. That means if he's actually passed Ed Sheeran's tour, he's charging a lot more for his tickets. Elton John's not a cheap show to see, and if it's his farewell tour, you might say, I'm going to pay $300 to see Elton John this time because I'm never going to see him again. So let's keep that in mind. Taylor is not going to be her VIP tickets will probably be $300 or more, but the average Taylor ticket price is probably going to be a lot lower, but she's going to play to a massive audience. Would love to see her there because she definitely deserves it. She is an icon, and we're seeing an icon being made in real time.
I do want to pivot now to some movie news. In October, it was announced director James Gunn and producer Peter Safran will be co-chairs and co-CEOs of DC Studios, and they just announced Chapter 1 of their new DC slate. Can you tell us about it? What stood out to you?
Yeah, looking at the slate, it's interesting what they're doing, and it's also predictable. It's smart, actually. First of all, they're taking Superman back to, it kind of took a darker turn. I don't know what they were chasing with the previous regime. They're bringing Superman back to what everyone knows Superman to be. It's American, it's apple pie, it's patriotic, it's feel good. It's that really it's uplifting stuff. This isn't going to be dark stuff.
It's America's superhero.
Correct, and they know that they need to keep it that way, and that will probably bring the audience back to Superman. You look at their other stuff. I mean, remember, these guys do have some hits behind them. We criticize them and compare them to Marvel, say they're not as successful. But if you remember, The Watchmen was a terrific miniseries, very dark. And Batman is a very dark superhero. And from the look of the trailer, they're going to keep Batman in that dark category. And they have a string of TV shows and movies that are coming out, including a Superwoman movie, which kind of hard to, she's a little darker, or at least a little more tortured than Superman is. But you can see they have this sort of mix of dark, edgy stuff, which is definitely selling well in popular culture, and sticking to the roots of something like Superman, which is, this is more of an E.T. feel good type thing. So I think it's smart what they're doing. And if you look at these franchises that are done, they don't necessarily have to lean on superheroes from the past, like Superman or Batman. You look at something, we talk about them all the time, Avatar. Avatar didn't exist as a franchise until 12 years ago. And now it's a definitive movie franchise. And that is effectively a comic book come to life on the screen, right? So these guys are not only dipping back into the DC catalog and keeping it true to its original nature, which made it so successful, they're also coming up with new programming that is experimenting with dark versus light kind of stuff. So I think it's a smart slate.
And James Gunn said that one of his major goals coming in was to keep the DCU more connected. Do you think that with this slate, his vision's coming to life?
That was a little harder to see. I'm not so deep into the. I think it's easier, perhaps, to see the connection in the Marvel universe. Maybe just because I'm a Marvel fan versus a DC fan. Excuse me, guys. Don't mean to insult. I don't see the connection, but I'm sure DC fans will. I mean, the true connection is, does Superman ever end up in a movie with Batman? Kind of like Thor has ended up in a movie with Captain America, which, again, as a Marvel fan, I was like, that's going to be kind of weird, but it works. Mm-hmm. So I don't see the connection. I see it more as a very smart, diverse slate of programming that both leans on the past and is a departure from the past. So we'll see how it plays out. I think it's smart.
I know you said you're a Marvel fan. You also called this slate smart. Do you think that these changes are enough for DC to actually contend with Marvel?
Good question. I don't know the answer. I think it's a smart move. I think it's strategically smart. I think they have good executive talent in there in these two guys. They have an excellent writer in Gunn. I think he's taken on a lot, and he's even said this. He's got to run a studio, but he's also writing the new Superman movie. There are folks out there who do it. Tyler Perry is a perfect example. He writes everything that he does, just about. We'll see how that plays out. This looks like a really smart move. We won't know for years to come whether it pays off, but it's certainly a step in the right direction.
So I guess you're answering my next question, but we saw a lot of upheaval in the late 2022 with DC leadership. Walter Hamada got the heave-ho. They brought these new co-CEOs in. Do you think this strategy is enough of a departure from the old DC?
It's a departure. It's a solid departure. It's a strong foot forward. Enough of a departure? Let's talk in 3 years. We'll talk after Superman comes out. Actually, we probably should talk after Batman comes out. Let's see the two. It's a strong foot forward. It's a good departure for sure.
I do now want to switch to some other news about Alec Baldwin and the Rust shooting. So involuntary manslaughter charges were formally filed against the actor and the film's armor after the shooting death of Helena Hutchins over a year ago. It seems like they're really throwing the book here at Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, it's surprising if you think of Alec Baldwin, the actor. You know, most actors are not responsible for the props. They're handed something, they do their scene and that. But he's a producer on this film. And that is, I'm sure, was a major factor for the prosecutors. He has responsibilities for this film. He's an investor in this film. So therefore, you should be on top of things more than just a hired actor should be on top of things. It's also been reported that the set had a fair bit of chaos on it, and that these arms weren't actually tended to the way they should have been tended. There's rules for how to handle live ammunition on a set. My personal feeling is, with effects the way they are, why do you need live ammunition on a set? I think a lot of people are asking that question at this point. But they still do. They still have it, but it's very carefully controlled. It has to be in a locked box. It can only the armor can hand a gun off to an actor or somebody else to use. This, I don't know, it wasn't there, but this is apparently not the case on the set of Rust. So you put all of that together, and it seems harsh. It's certainly a heavy allegation, but he does bear more responsibility than just Alec Baldwin, the actor.
And as we know, it is rare, but there have been deaths on other movie sets before. Is this type of charge unprecedented?
Well, it is. I mean, the only other shooting death that I know of was the Brandon Lee shooting from a few years back. No one was charged in that. And then it was a helicopter death, I think, on another film. So it's unprecedented, but it's also an unprecedented situation.
And how do you think that this will impact Alec Baldwin's career, his brand? I mean, just within the Trump administration, he had a career high playing him on SNL, and then this has been a drastic fall. Is there any coming back for Alec Baldwin?
I'll tell you in November 2024, because if Trump gets reelected, he's going to be back on Saturday Night Live, and he's going to hit a high point again. That's for sure. He does the best Trump imitation out there. A comeback, look, we haven't heard much about Will Smith since he slapped Chris Rock, right? He'll come back. He'll do something. He's just going to lay low. I just was checking out the other day. Louis C.K. sold out Madison Square Garden. What?
I know. That was wild.
So, you can't write these folks off. But he's gonna have to take a low profile for a while. This is bad. This is a bad look.
Serious. Yeah. And finally, let's hit the box office.
Yeah.
It sounds like, we're doing Groundhog's Day every week that we're talking about the box office. There's been one winner since December. Who is that winner?
Avatar, Way of Water. And I finally saw it, so I can speak about it with some knowledge. It's hard to tell what's happening exactly. There's not been a lot of great competition against Avatar. There's not really been any big stuff. I mean, you've got kind of an artsy movie with Tom Hanks that's a recreation of a book. Okay. Then you've got a spin-off of, a Shrek franchise, a sub-franchise of Shrek. And then you've got, Megan, which is, this is not Jurassic Park or Star Wars coming out against Avatar. It's hard to tell whether the distributors in Hollywood were just saying, let's hold back and just let this Cameron thing play out until Memorial Day, which you'll see the tentpole stuff coming out again. If that wasn't the plan and this is just sort of a pandemic fallout and there isn't a lot of stuff in the pipeline, okay, great. But they're thinking it now. The next time an Avatar movie or a Cameron movie comes out, I'm sure that you're going to have this 3-month lag, because it's kind of astounding what his movies are doing in the box office consistently.
I know. I do want to talk about that. Avatar's overtaken Star Wars The Force Awakens to become the 4th highest grossing movie of all time. And now it has its sights set on Titanic, another James Cameron movie. So it's a really good time to be James Cameron. But do we think that Avatar: The Way of Water can surpass Titanic and knock it out of third place?
Oh, it's got a very good shot. I think they're roughly $100 million apart. And I think Titanic is running at now 10 million a weekend or so. It'll be out in theaters it won't be doing 10 million for the next 2 months, but it'll be dribbling down. I very easily see it passing Titanic. I don't see it taking the number 2 spot, but it would be amazing. I'm sure Jim Cameron would love to see number 1, 2, and 3 with his films up there. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think it's going to surpass Titanic.
And Titanic is, surprisingly enough, being re-released for Valentine's Day. Do you think that there is enough of an appetite for people to go out, see Titanic again in theaters, maybe edge it up a little bit in the ranks?
Sure, I think people will go see it. I mean, it's probably a dated movie at this point. I haven't seen it in a while, so I'm not sure if it stands the test of time. It's perfect to put it out on Valentine's Day. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. It'll nudge up in its total take for sure. I think there's just so much momentum behind Avatar, and it probably hasn't fully played out in all of the international markets yet, whereas Titanic has by now. You've seen Titanic by now, so you're going to have to be a big fan to go see it again, whereas there's a lot of people who probably, like myself, hadn't seen it until last weekend, who haven't seen Avatar. So there's a momentum that it will take Titanic. I'm going to make that prediction. I don't normally make them, but it's going to take Titanic.
You heard it here first. And I mean, I've seen Titanic, and I've had Titanic when it was the 2 VHS box set. So, I mean, we've all seen Titanic at this point. But Rob LaFranco, thank you so much.
Great to be here.